Most people spend their entire lives running from failure, from discomfort, from truth. But one day, the lies you tell yourself begin to collapse, and you're forced to face what you've avoided. That emotions rule more than reason, that kindness often hides self-interest, that comfort is the enemy of growth, and that every illusion you cling to is quietly stealing your freedom. The Stoics knew this. Truth burns before it frees. The moment you stop chasing control, stop demanding fairness, and stop pretending you're immortal, everything changes. You see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. And in that clarity, you find strength. This isn't a lesson in despair, it's an invitation to wake up, to see clearly, and to live deliberately before your time runs out. There was a night I couldn't sleep. The room was dark, silent, yet inside my head it was chaos. My thoughts kept replaying the same question over and over. What if everything I believed about life was a lie? Not a small lie, not a comforting half-truth, but something deeper, woven into the way I'd lived my entire life. I had always believed that effort guarantees reward, that kindness ensures respect, that life in the end somehow balances itself out. But that night, lying awake, I realized something that shook me. None of that was true. It didn't happen in a dramatic moment. No betrayal, no tragedy. It came quietly, like a slow leak you never notice until it stains the walls. I began to see how fragile my little world was, built on expectations, on illusions dressed up as hope. I saw how often I had worked myself to exhaustion expecting fairness, only to face indifference. How often I had given, expecting gratitude, only to meet silence. The truth wasn't that life was cruel. It was that life was indifferent, and I had confused my comfort with control. For years I lived inside that illusion. I chased goals because I thought they'd save me, collected approval because I thought it meant love. But the more I achieved, the emptier it felt. Every victory came with a strange stillness. No applause loud enough, no success deep enough. It terrified me, because if all the things I'd been taught to chase didn't matter, then what did? I remember one evening walking home after another long day at work. I stopped at a shop window and caught my own reflection. For a moment, I didn't recognize the person staring back. He looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying something heavy, illusions. I saw a man trying to make sense of a world that didn't care about fairness, still waiting for life to reward him for doing everything right. That was the moment the mirror cracked. It wasn't a breakdown. It was an awakening. I began to question everything, my motives, my desires, my idea of success. I started noticing how much of my life was spent chasing validation from people who were too busy chasing their own. How much of my pain came not from reality, but from my refusal to accept it. The Stoics call this moment the beginning of wisdom, the death of illusion. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." For the first time, I understood what he meant. It wasn't the world that hurt me. It was the stories I told myself about how it should be. Truth, when it first arrives, feels like betrayal. It tears apart the little fictions you've built to stay safe. It exposes how fragile your beliefs really are. But behind the pain, there's something purer, clarity. It's like standing in a room after a storm. The air is heavy, but suddenly you can see the sky again. Once you taste that kind of clarity, you can't go back. You can't pretend not to know. You can't live half awake anymore. Since that night, I've learned that most people aren't afraid of failure, they're afraid of truth. Because truth doesn't care about your comfort, your image, or your plans. It strips you bare, and what's left isn't always pretty. But it's real. And what's real is the only thing that can set you free. I started observing people differently. The way they talk, the way they hide behind confidence or humor or endless busyness. We're all running from something. Some run from their past, some from emptiness, some from silence. but no one really outruns the truth. It catches up, quietly, in moments of stillness. The truth waits patiently for you to stop lying to yourself. The Stoics taught that philosophy isn't about lofty ideals. It's about survival, learning to stand in the fire of reality and not flinch. They didn't believe in comforting lies. They believed in strength through awareness. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." I had spent my whole life believing I understood success, love, morality, and fairness. But knowing was the problem. It blinded me. Only when everything I knew stopped working did I start to see. Now when I wake up, I no longer ask, "What do I want from life?" I ask, "What illusion am I still clinging to?" Because every disappointment I've ever had came from expecting life to fit a story that never existed. The truth is simpler and harder. Life doesn't promise you anything. It doesn't owe you fairness or reward. But it gives you something far greater, the chance to see clearly, to act wisely, to live truthfully. And here's the paradox. Once you stop chasing illusions, the world starts making sense. You no longer need everything to go your way, because you've stopped believing it ever should. You no longer fear losing things, because you understand they were never yours to keep. You stop demanding constant happiness, because you realize peace doesn't come from the world outside, it comes from within. When illusion dies and truth takes its place, you begin to live freely. If you've ever done everything right and still felt lost, maybe you're starting to see the cracks in your own story. Don't turn away from that feeling. Follow it. It's the sound of awakening. The truth may burn, but it only burns what isn't real. If this message speaks to you, if you feel that quiet pull towards something more honest, more raw, more real, subscribe. It's a commitment to your own growth, a promise that you'll keep walking the path toward clarity, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Because this journey isn't about comfort. It's about truth. Now I want to ask you something, a question only you can answer. When life shatters one of your comforting illusions, what do you do? A. You rebuild it quickly so the pain fades. B. You let it collapse and learn to live without it. Comment your answer, A or B, and tell me why. Your response might just help someone else face their own truth tonight. After that night, something inside me changed. Once you see through one illusion, you start to see through them all. The cracks widen, the light slips in, and suddenly, everything you used to believe starts to tremble beneath your feet. I began to notice how much of my life was ruled not by reason, but by emotion, by the quiet, invisible tides beneath every decision I made. I told myself I was logical, deliberate, thoughtful. But the truth was simpler and more uncomfortable. I did what felt right, then built logic around it. I remember one morning vividly. I was standing in line for coffee, exhausted after a night of overthinking. I overheard a man ahead of me snapping at the barista because his drink took too long. His anger looked ridiculous, but I recognized it. It was me, every time I lashed out at someone because life wasn't bending to my will. Every time I justified frustration as standing up for myself. I realized how emotions disguise themselves as principles. Anger pretending to be justice. Pride pretending to be confidence. Fear pretending to be caution. We are masters at lying to ourselves, and worse, we call those lies values. The Stoics warned about this blindness. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Yet I had spent years mistaking reaction for strength. I let every piece of praise or criticism pull me one way or another. I called it passion, but it was slavery. Emotion was the puppeteer, and I was dancing to its rhythm. It's strange how awareness hurts before it heals. Once you see how emotional you really are, you start to see it everywhere. In how you spend, how you love, how you argue. You start to realize most people around you are driven the same way. Nobody's really listening. They're defending their pride. Nobody's seeking truth. They're protecting their image. The world begins to look like a marketplace of egos, each one trading validation for comfort. And suddenly, logic feels like a dying language. I saw it in myself when I apologized, not because I was wrong, but because I feared being disliked. When I worked late nights not out of purpose, but out of fear of being forgotten. When I gave advice not to help, but to feel wise. Self-interest hides in everything, even the good. The Stoics weren't shocked by that. They expected it. They didn't call it evil, they called it nature. To understand human nature is not to judge it, but to navigate it wisely. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He wasn't being cynical. He was preparing for truth. He understood that people act according to what they think benefits them. The only mistake is expecting them not to. I realized how many times I'd been disappointed because I refused to see people clearly. We all want to believe we're exceptions, that we act from kindness, from reason, from purity. But even our kindness has a motive, the warmth of approval, the comfort of belonging, the relief of guilt. It's not evil, it's human. But until you understand that, you'll keep expecting people to act against their own nature. You'll keep mistaking self-interest for betrayal. And you'll keep getting hurt by the truth that everyone, including you, is motivated by what serves them. That's when I began to change the question I asked about people. Instead of, why did they do that? I started asking, what did they need? It softened me strangely, not weaker, but wiser. I stopped expecting purity from a species built for survival. I learned to listen beneath the words, to see the emotions and fears that drive behavior. Once you do that, anger gives way to understanding. Disappointment gives way to acceptance. And when you see through others clearly, something else happens. You start seeing through yourself. You begin to catch the moments when your ego takes the wheel, when you crave validation, when you use logic to hide an emotional wound. That awareness doesn't make you flawless. It makes you honest. And honesty, though painful, is the foundation of strength. The truth is, no one is purely logical. We are emotional creatures pretending to be rational ones. The Stoic path isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering it. Learning to pause between the feeling and the reaction, to observe without becoming the thing you observe. That small pause is where freedom begins. When I started to practice that pause, the world slowed down. The arguments that once consumed me lost their fire. The opinions that once defined me became noise. And for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to life, I was living it. It's not easy. It never will be. But mastery isn't the absence of emotion. It's the presence of awareness. That awareness is the first step out of illusion and the beginning of peace. There came a moment when understanding others was no longer enough. I had to face myself. After seeing how much of human behavior was driven by emotion and self-interest, I started to wonder, what were mine? It's easy to dissect other people's illusions. It's excruciating to tear down your own. The truth about others feels like insight, but the truth about yourself feels like exposure. I began to see that every mask I criticized in others had its reflection in me. Every lie I noticed around me had once been my own defense. I started journaling, not to record my days, but to confess them. At first, it was mechanical, a few sentences written half-heartedly before bed. But then the words started cutting deeper. I caught myself describing moments I wasn't proud of. The time I exaggerated an achievement to feel important. The time I acted kind not from care, but to be admired. It was brutal to see how much of what I called goodness was just vanity in disguise. And yet, the more honest I became, the lighter I felt. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not to inspire others, but to keep himself from self-deception. I understood why. The mind polishes its own image, erasing the stains that contradict who we think we are. We spend our lives protecting that image, curating it, defending it, worshiping it, until it becomes our prison. I realized I had built one, brick by brick, from every compliment I clung to and every criticism I ran from. The moment I saw it for what it was, I felt the walls begin to crack. The hardest part wasn't admitting my flaws. It was admitting how much I'd known them all along. The ego doesn't lie to protect ignorance, it lies to protect pride. I had always known I was impatient, prideful, easily bruised, but I wrapped those truths in prettier words. Driven, independent, honest, labels that hid the wound while making it sound noble. That's how self-deception works. It flatters you while it blinds you. There was a night when I sat in silence, no music, no distractions, and asked the question I had avoided for years: who am I when no one's watching? The answer didn't come as words, it came as discomfort. I felt the weight of every performance I'd given, every role I'd played to win affection, every smile that wasn't sincere. It wasn't shame that filled me, but grief. Grief for the years spent pretending. The Stoics believed that freedom begins with truth, even when it hurts. To them, honesty wasn't a virtue for others, it was a weapon against the self. I realized that the person I was trying to become couldn't exist until I stopped clinging to the person I thought I was. Growth demanded a death, the death of illusion, the death of the polished self. Most people never reach that point. They spend their lives polishing the mask, terrified of what lies beneath. But the pain of seeing yourself clearly is nothing compared to the suffering of living blind. Once you've seen the truth, even a fragment of it, there's no turning back. You begin to live differently, less defensive, less certain, but far more alive. That night, I closed my journal and whispered something I hadn't said before. Let me be real. Not perfect, not admired, not invincible, just real. Because only when you stop lying to yourself can you begin to change. And only when you face your own truth can you finally meet the world without fear. Once I started seeing myself clearly, the world began to look different too. Every interaction revealed something hidden. Every silence spoke louder than words. It was as if life had handed me a new set of eyes. But clarity, I learned, comes with a cost. The more you see people as they are, the harder it is to pretend you don't. I started noticing patterns in behavior, the subtle contradictions between what people said and what they did. Promises that dissolved when they were no longer convenient. Smiles that hid resentment. Compliments laced with envy. At first, I thought I was becoming cynical. But over time I understood. I wasn't losing faith in people. I was losing my illusions about them. There was a man I once admired deeply, someone I thought lived with integrity. He spoke of loyalty, discipline, truth. I wanted to be like him. But one day, I saw him twist those very principles to serve his own interest. It shattered me, not because he was flawed, but because I had made him my mirror. I realized I didn't admire him, I worshipped the image I wanted him to be. And that image had nothing to do with reality. People will always show you who they are. The tragedy is that most of us refuse to believe them. It's strange how many signs we ignore simply because they threaten our comfort. We excuse betrayals, rationalize red flags, rewrite memories, all to preserve the illusion of stability. I had done it countless times, convincing myself that someone would change, that words meant more than actions. But the truth is brutal and simple. They won't. People rarely change, and when they do, it's never because you wanted them to. It's because life forced them to face something they could no longer avoid. I remember sitting alone one evening, replaying a conversation I'd had with a friend who had disappointed me again. I felt anger, then sadness, then an eerie calm. For the first time, I didn't make excuses for them. I just accepted what was true. Their actions were louder than their words. And in that acceptance, something broke and something else healed. I stopped expecting others to be what I needed them to be. I started taking them for who they were. It wasn't bitterness. It was freedom. The Stoics taught that wisdom begins when you stop arguing with reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That line struck me like a bell in the dark. I had spent years trying to understand why people failed to live up to their words, why they betrayed, why they disappointed. But I had missed the simplest lesson. It's not my job to fix their reflection. It's my job to embody my own. As I let go of those expectations, I noticed something powerful happen. I became quieter. I stopped reacting to every betrayal as if it were personal. I saw that resentment was just attachment in disguise, the refusal to let go of who I thought someone should be. Once I accepted people's patterns for what they were, I stopped taking their behavior as a statement about me. That clarity didn't harden me, it softened me. It gave me peace. The world didn't change. I did. I learned to trust patterns, not promises. To listen to what people do, not what they say. To understand that their choices reveal their truth more honestly than their confessions ever could. And as I grew more aware, another truth emerged. Comfort was my last illusion. Because once you start seeing reality for what it is, comfort becomes impossible. Growth begins only when you step into the cold light of truth. When you stop waiting for the world to behave and start mastering how you respond to it. The more I saw the world as it really was, the quieter I became. That's where strength is born, not from control, but from clarity. There's a certain stillness that arrives after illusion dies. It's not peace exactly, it's awareness. You begin to understand that most things you once cared about never really mattered. The arguments, the gossip, the endless proving of yourself, they dissolve like mist. What remains is something raw and terrifyingly honest: time. You start to realize how little of it you have left. That's the moment everything changes. For a long time, I believed that awareness was enough, that seeing through illusion meant I had won. But awareness without action is paralysis. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it, and that knowledge demands something of you. You can't keep living half awake, chasing meaningless things while pretending not to know they're meaningless. That's when the thought of death started visiting me, not as fear, but as reminder. It whispered, "Don't waste this." At first, it unsettled me. The idea that every breath, every sunrise was one less felt too heavy to bear. But the more I accepted it, the lighter I became. Death, I realized, isn't an enemy, it's a teacher. It strips away everything false. It asks, what will still matter when you're gone? It doesn't care about status, approval, or pride. It only cares about truth. I remember the moment I stopped running from that truth. I was walking alone just before dawn. The city was quiet, the air cold enough to sting. For a second, everything fell silent, the noise of thought, the weight of memory. And I understood something simple yet profound. I will die. Maybe not today, maybe not soon, but inevitably. And that thought didn't scare me. It set me free. Because in that clarity, I saw how much of my life had been lived as if I were immortal, postponing, hesitating, waiting for perfect moments that never came. Death took that illusion away. It left behind urgency, purpose, and gratitude. The Stoics had a name for this awareness: memento mori. Remember that you will die. But they didn't meditate on death to be morbid. They did it to live better. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short life, but that we waste much of it. Every day we scroll, argue, compare, complain as if time were endless. But it isn't. Every distraction steals a piece of the life you'll never get back." Since embracing that truth, I've started living differently. I no longer chase people or approval. I no longer cling to possessions or plans. Instead, I ask one question before I do anything. If this were my last day, would it matter? Most of the time, the answer is no, and that no becomes liberation. It cuts away the unnecessary. It gives weight to the real. Suddenly, a conversation with someone you love becomes sacred. A sunrise becomes a gift. The little moments you used to ignore become proof that you're still alive. I don't think about death to be fearless. I think about it to be awake. Because when you remember that you'll die, the fear of embarrassment, failure, and rejection begins to fade. What's left is courage. The courage to speak truth. To love deeply. To act now, not later. Marcus Aurelius said, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's not despair, it's clarity. It's the compass that points you back to what matters. The irony is, once you accept death, life becomes fuller. You start saying what you mean. You forgive faster. You stop chasing people who don't care and start caring about the people who stayed. You stop living for the next goal and start living for the next breath. There's beauty in that simplicity, a kind of sacred urgency that makes every ordinary day extraordinary. I used to think the point of philosophy was to make sense of life. Now I understand its real purpose, to teach you how to live before it's too late, to strip away illusion until what remains is truth, and to teach you to love that truth, even when it hurts. Because when you face reality without flinching, when you live with both feet grounded in the present, you finally become free. So if you're listening to this, take a moment. Look around. The people you love, the air you breathe, the time passing as you sit here, they won't last forever. But that's what makes them precious. Don't waste your life waiting to live. Let death remind you to begin. And if this message resonates with you, if you want to keep walking this path toward clarity and strength, subscribe to the channel. It's more than a click, it's a small act of courage. A decision to face the truth, to live deliberately, and to keep growing alongside those who choose the same. Because life is short, but wisdom makes it infinite.